Long ago, in the heart of the boundless Russian land, where mists drift over silent rivers and midnight winds whisper ancient prayers, people did not heal with pills or needles, but with the raw power of nature, with faith, and, at times, with sheer, reckless courage. From snake venom to the ashes of holy icons, every village guarded its own secret cures. And now, here are 25 of the most unbelievable Russian folk medicines you may have never heard of. 1. Ash from a burned icon, the spirit's whisper. Long ago, in the remote villages of northern Russia, where the frost kissed the wooden rooftops before sunrise and the wind sang through the pines like an ancient hymn, there existed a peculiar remedy whispered from generation to generation, the ash of a burned icon. This was no ordinary ash. It was gathered from sacred moments of fire, when a votive icon, blessed in the candlelit corner of a peasant's home, was consumed by a controlled flame, leaving behind a delicate powdery residue, black as soot yet tinged with a silvery shimmer, like tiny fragments of starlight trapped in winter night. The smell was heavy and sharp, a mingling of scorched wood, melted wax, and the faintly sweet incense that clung stubbornly to the painting even as it perished. To touch it was to feel the brittle weight of devotion itself. Grains slipped like whispers through the fingers, each one carrying centuries of prayer, sorrow, and hope. Mothers would grind it gently with their worn wooden mortars, inhaling its acrid warmth, believing that even a single pinch, dissolved in water or mixed with honey, could strengthen the body, calm fevers, or protect the soul from misfortune. The act was fraught with reverence and fear. To take the ash required precise ritual. One must never touch it with bare hands, lest the spirit within become restless, and it had to be gathered at dawn, when the first pale light of winter touched the frost-laden earth. Folk healers, often old women with hair white as birch bark and eyes like river ice, were the guardians of this secret. They whispered that the ash contained the essence of resilience, of divine witness, that it could carry messages from the beyond, bridging the mortal and the holy. In one legend, a boy, feverish and near death, drank a teaspoon of ash dissolved in warm milk, and as the village prayed through the night, his breath evened, his skin cooled, and he awoke at dawn as if kissed by a new life. The ash was never taken lightly. It was both medicine and talisman, a fragment of the sacred consumed by fire and reborn in human hands. Its use waned as modern apothecaries rose, but in hushed corners of the frozen north, elderly women still recall the sharp scent of burned wood and wax, the powder slipping between fingers like snow, and the miraculous quiet warmth that followed, a whisper of faith preserved in ash, a defiance of time and decay itself. It was more than a cure, it was a conversation with eternity, a ritual that reminded the living that the divine could touch the everyday, even through the remnants of fire. 2. Birch tar ointment. Black gold of the forest. In the dense, shadowed forests of Siberia, where sunlight barely touched the moss-covered earth, people discovered a sticky, resinous substance that would become a cornerstone of folk medicine, birch tar. Its aroma was pungent, smoky, and raw, like a bonfire smoldering in the heart of a pine grove, a scent that clung to the nostrils and lingered in the memory long after leaving the forest. The tar itself was thick, black, and glossy, with a texture like warm molasses cooled too quickly, pliable, yet unyielding to the touch. It was said to carry the soul of the birch tree, distilled over months in clay pits and stone ovens, and the knowledge of how to prepare it was guarded jealously by elders. Applied to wounds, sores, and burns, the tar drew out infection, soothed pain, and hardened the skin against frostbite, its warmth seeping like sunlight trapped inside wood. Shamans believed the tar could also protect the wearer from evil spirits. A thin layer smeared along the chest or forehead was said to form a barrier invisible to the eye, a shield born of the forest itself. Legends told of hunters lost in the taiga, finding salvation when they smeared birch tar on their hands and feet, feeling the burn and the heat as a warning, a guiding spirit through blizzards and wolves. Mothers kept small lumps in carved wooden boxes, giving their children the tar to rub on scrapes, whispering blessings and prayers as they did so. Each application was an intimate ritual, hands stained black, the sweet, acrid scent filling the home, merging with the smell of burning stove and pine logs. It was more than medicine, it was a tangible connection to the forest, a reminder that life and survival depended on harmony with the trees, the wind, and the whispered lessons of ancestors. Even today, small Siberian communities honor birch tar as black gold, a living heritage of resilience, pain, and forest-born magic. 3. Snail Mucus Salve. Tears of the Earth. On the damp, shadowed banks of rivers and in the dewy meadows of central Russia, peasants discovered a remarkable secret: the healing power of snails. Not merely a curiosity of the garden, but a source of gentle, translucent mucus, collected by hand in the quiet pre-dawn hours. The mucus was thick yet fluid, glistening like liquid pearl in the morning light, slippery against the skin and faintly warm as if it carried the heartbeat of the earth itself. It had a subtle earthy scent, mingled with the mineral sweetness of wet soil and river mud. Gathered carefully, mixed with beeswax and elderflower extracts, it became a salve applied to burns, scratches, and inflamed skin. Villagers believed it carried the slow, deliberate wisdom of the creatures, imbued with patience and the secret rhythms of life. Grandmothers would rub the salve on their children's cheeks, whispering tales of endurance and long life, while midwives applied it to delicate newborn skin to protect against frostbite and rashes. The ritual of collection was itself a meditation, the slow tracing of snails across fingers, the gentle coaxing from leaf to jar, all done in near silence as the forest stirred awake. Legends held that those who carried a vial of snail mucus during journeys would find the earth kinder, streams deeper, roots stronger, soil yielding its abundance. The salve became an emblem of quiet, hidden power, a medicine not born of fire or steel, but of patience, moisture, and the unhurried pulse of life that moved unseen beneath leaf and stone. To rub it on the skin was to touch the slow miracle of existence, to feel the gentle perseverance of the world itself whisper through one's veins. Its fame was whispered from village to village, surviving through frost, famine, and war, a testament to the enduring ingenuity of human hands guided by observation, reverence, and the tactile poetry of nature.
4. 바드커 컴프레스 The Spirit in the Frost.
In the bitter heart of winter, when snow lay deep upon the roofs of wooden cottages and the wind cut through fur coats like icy knives, Russian folk medicine found warmth in an unlikely source: vodka. Not for drinking alone, but as a compress, a medium of heat and healing. Healers would soak linen cloths in strong, clear vodka, then wrap them around sore joints, sprains, or swollen muscles. The scent was sharp, medicinal, and almost ethereal, a vapor that made the nose tingle and the lungs expand with cold clarity. The alcohol drew blood to the surface, warming bones and muscles as if the spirit of the fire itself flowed through the veins. Fathers and grandfathers applied the compresses while the hearth blazed, the smell of melting fat and burning logs mingling with the pungent spirit, the children watching with a mixture of fear and awe. Folklore held that vodka could carry not only warmth but courage, pushing away winter's lethargy and warding off illness by hardening the body against frost and fatigue. The compresses became part of ritual, the careful folding of linen, the measured soaking, the whispered prayers to saints for protection and recovery. In some tales, hunters returning from frozen forests, frostbitten and weary, would be revived by a single application, the vodka working its invisible fire to thaw bone and spirit alike. The compress was more than relief. It was a connection between human endurance and elemental force, a bridge between heat and ice, alcohol and flesh, mortal fragility and the unyielding northern winter. In kitchens and barns, the scent of vodka compresses lingered like a ghostly reminder that even in the harshest frost, life could bend without breaking, and warmth could come from the simplest, sharpest spirit of the land.
5. Onion juice Poultice Tears of the House.
In the humble kitchens and smoky bathhouses of Russian villages, where iron pots clanged over stoves and the aroma of rye bread mingled with wood smoke, onion was more than food, it was medicine. Peasants discovered that the juice of raw onions, pungent and sharp, could pierce not only the senses but also the maladies of the body. Extracted with care, its sulphurous scent thick and tearing, it was applied as a poultice to boils, infections, and fevers. Fingers stained yellow, hands fragrant with the acrid sweetness of onions, women whispered prayers as they pressed cloths soaked in juice against the skin. Children cried, not only from illness but from the fierce tang that made eyes water, yet in this discomfort was the promise of healing. Healers spoke of onion as the embodiment of the hearth itself, layers protecting the fire, each stratum a barrier against illness, each slice a talisman of protection. In winter, when cold crept into bones, poultices warmed by stove fire drew fever from the skin, the essence of onion entering the pores like a bitter whisper, soothing and cleansing. It was also a symbol, a bridge between nourishment and defense, sustaining the body while reminding it of the home's protective warmth. Through famine and plague, the onion poultice endured, its sharp scent and pungent tears a daily act of survival and devotion. Its story is one of intimacy, the hands that prepared it, the hearth that sustained it, and the human body as both canvas and vessel for the alchemy of homegrown remedies, where pungent juice became shield, salve, and whispered promise in equal measure. 6. Honey and wax balm, the golden healer. Deep in the heart of the countryside, where hives hummed beneath the midsummer sun and fields shimmered in waves of gold, the people of old Russia turned to their sweetest ally, honey. But it was no mere treat for the tongue. It was the lifeblood of healing, a golden balm whispered to have been gifted by the bees themselves. In dark wooden cottages, old women melted beeswax in clay pots until it flowed like liquid amber, then mixed it with raw honey thick as syrup, fragrant with the wildflowers of distant meadows. The scent filled the air, sweet yet earthy, carrying hints of clover, heather, and pine resin. It was warm to the touch, soothing the skin like a mother's hand, sealing wounds, and mending burns with its sticky tenderness. Folk healers spoke of honey as a living thing, a guardian spirit that breathed through every drop, carrying within it the sun's memory. When spread upon cuts, it was said to sing silently against infection, its sweetness devouring decay, leaving only health and renewal behind. Farmers would anoint the hands of their children with the golden balm before the harvest, praying it would keep blisters and illness away. Brides rubbed it on their cheeks for glow and luck, and the elderly took small spoonfuls with prayers for longevity, whispering thanks to the bees, those winged messengers between heaven and earth. Even in death, honey played its part, used to anoint the foreheads of the departed, preserving their peace and slowing their fading. Each drop shimmered with the alchemy of life and time, proof that healing could be both beautiful and sacred. The honey and wax balm was not only medicine, it was the embodiment of light captured by patient creatures, a reminder that even in the harshest world, sweetness had the power to heal.
7. 브레드 앤드 솔트 폴티스. The cure of the common soul.
When famine loomed and medicine was a dream for the rich, the people turned to what they knew best, bread and salt. Two humble elements, sacred and sustaining, fused into a remedy born from survival and faith. The bread, dark, coarse, made of rye, was ground and softened with hot water, then sprinkled with salt until the mixture became a thick, grainy paste. It smelled of hearth smoke and earth, sour and familiar, like the very essence of the home itself. This poultice was spread upon swollen wounds and abscesses, wrapped in linen, and left overnight to draw out the sickness. In the morning, the cloth would be heavy, darkened, and damp, proof, they said, that the evil had been pulled from the body. In the flicker of candlelight, mothers whispered that salt was purity, bread was life, and together they formed a shield against decay. The ritual carried the weight of belief. Before applying the poultice, one had to break a fresh loaf and make the sign of the cross over it, as if inviting divine blessing into the humble remedy. The warmth of the bread soothed, the salt purified, and the scent brought comfort even in times of hunger. The people saw it not merely as medicine, but as a holy act, a fusion of survival and sanctity, of flesh and faith. For those who lived through war and frost, famine and plague, bread and salt were not just sustenance. They were proof that the simplest gifts of earth, when used with reverence, could defy despair. The poultice, steaming gently in the dim cottage air, became a symbol of endurance, of ordinary holiness born from daily life. 8. Bear fat rub, warmth of the wilderness. There was a time when the forests of Russia roared with life, wolves in the dark, elk in the mist, and bears whose spirits were feared and worshipped alike. From these mighty beasts came one of the strangest and most powerful folk cures, bear fat. Rendered slowly over fire until clear and glistening like pale gold, it was stored in jars wrapped in linen, its scent musky, primal, and faintly smoky, as if the very breath of the forest had been trapped inside. Hunters revered it, for it was believed that the strength and endurance of the bear flowed through the oil. Rubbing it on the chest was said to cure coughs and lung ailments. Massaging it into weary limbs restored vitality after long hunts or bitter winters. The texture was smooth, almost velvety, and when warmed, it melted into the skin like candle wax. In the deep snows, it became both medicine and armor, sealing warmth into the flesh. Mothers used it on their children's chests during nights of illness, whispering prayers to the bear's spirit, thanking it for its sacrifice. There were tales that even warriors before battle anointed themselves with the fat to summon the bear's courage and endurance. Its scent lingered for days, mingling with smoke, sweat, and the earthy breath of fur coats. Though many feared to take life from the forest's guardian, they also believed the bear's essence was too sacred to waste. Thus, every drop of fat was used with gratitude, every jar sealed with respect. In the end, it was not merely a balm but a communion with nature, a union of man and beast, of body and wild soul, of survival and reverence. The warmth of the wilderness lived on in the flesh of those who honored it. 9. Spider web bandage. Threads of the hidden. Deep in the corners of log cabins and forest shrines, the weavers of fate, spiders, spun their silent miracles. Their webs, fragile yet stronger than silk, were once gathered by the careful hands of healers to create one of the most unusual remedies known to Russian folklore: spider web bandages. The process was delicate. Only the clean, dry threads from forest spiders were taken, collected with goose feathers and sunlight, and then layered gently over cuts and wounds. When placed upon the skin, the web clung like a whisper, its texture soft yet strangely resilient, and within hours it began to harden, forming a natural seal. The smell was faint, dry dust and wood, yet the sight of it, shimmering like frost in the candlelight, filled the sick room with quiet awe. The people believed that the spider's patience, its tireless work and quiet cunning, passed into the wound, weaving new flesh where old had torn. Some healers mixed the webs with honey or tar, creating a salve that protected soldiers in the field. There was a legend of a wounded hunter who survived a wolf attack by binding his gashes with webs, walking home through the storm as if guided by invisible threads of fate. The spider's web was more than medicine, it was a metaphor, of fragility and strength, of invisible bonds that held life together. In a world of rough hands and hard winters, such delicate magic was a reminder that even the smallest creatures could save the greatest lives. 10. Cabbage leaf poultice, the green shield. In the modest gardens of peasants and the fields beyond the village fence, rows of cabbages stood like silent sentinels, their broad green leaves glistening with dew and smelling faintly of earth and rain. From these simple plants came a cure as old as the soil itself, the cabbage leaf poultice. Torn fresh from the stalk, its cool, waxy surface was pressed to fevered brows, swollen joints, or aching chests. The sensation was immediate, a tender chill, followed by a creeping warmth as the leaf drew out inflammation. Its veins pulsed faintly, alive with moisture, and its scent, raw, vegetal, almost sweet, filled the air like a whisper of summer fields. To prepare it properly, healers warmed the leaf slightly by the stove, beating it gently with a wooden mallet to awaken its juices. Then they laid it over the skin and bound it in linen, murmuring prayers to the earth spirits for balance and strength. It was a humble cure, but in its simplicity lay power. The leaf absorbed pain, fever, even infection, returning only calm and clarity. Peasants believed the cabbage had a soul of purity, untainted and steadfast, capable of absorbing human suffering. In the long nights of winter, when medicine was scarce and hope thinner still, the green poultice became a quiet miracle, a shield between the frail human body and the merciless cold. Even today, the faint aroma of bruised cabbage in a Russian kitchen carries echoes of those ancient rituals, when healing came not from the apothecary but from the living earth itself. 11. Birch tar, the smoke of purification. When the forests of Russia whispered in spring and the birch trees bled their white, resinous tears, villagers gathered that sacred lifeblood and transformed it into one of the most pungent and powerful medicines of their world, birch tar. The process itself was an act of devotion. Long hours of slow burning, wood stacked and sealed in clay pits, smoke curling like ghostly serpents into the cold air. What emerged was a thick, black, oily substance with a sharp, smoky aroma, part earth, part fire, part mystery. Its touch was sticky and warm, clinging to the skin like a living shadow. Healers used birch tar to treat everything from skin rashes to infections, rubbing it into wounds that refused to close, or mixing it with animal fat to form balms that kept rot at bay. The smell filled homes and barns alike, a bitter burnt scent that spoke of fire's cleansing power. Some said it carried the essence of the forest soul, distilled and tamed for human use. There were rituals. Before applying it, a healer would light a candle, whisper a prayer to the spirit of the birch, the White Mother who protected both woods and people, and ask her forgiveness for taking her strength. The black tar against pale skin looked almost ritualistic, as though the body had been marked by the forest itself. People feared and revered it, for though its scent lingered for days, so too did its power. To wear birch tar was to carry a fragment of the forest's immortality, a reminder that the line between decay and healing, death and renewal, could be drawn in smoke and sap. 12. Vodka and pepper tincture. Fire within the frost. In the endless winters of old Russia, when the wind cut through fur and bone alike, people found warmth not just by the hearth, but within a burning draught of their own making, vodka and pepper. It was more than a drink, it was medicine, courage, and prayer distilled in one. Clear as ice and sharp as steel, the vodka bit the tongue, while crushed red pepper burned its way through the veins, igniting life where frost had crept in. In peasant huts, the mixture simmered briefly over flame, releasing an aroma both acrid and invigorating, the smell of fire and survival. It was taken in small, reverent sips, sometimes with honey to soothe the throat, sometimes pure, as a test of strength. Those suffering from chills, fevers, or the cruel bite of frost were made to drink and sweat it out under thick wool blankets. The warmth spread from the belly outward, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Soldiers on the front lines swore by it. Travelers crossing the frozen tundra carried flasks filled with the fiery elixir. Yet it was not merely physical medicine, it was spiritual armor. To drink vodka and pepper was to declare defiance against nature's indifference, to meet winter with fire in one's veins. Folk tales told of the spirit of frost, retreating from those whose breath carried the heat of pepper. And so, in the silence of the long dark months, as frost patterns bloomed on window panes, the red glow of the tincture shone like a talisman, proof that in the coldest of worlds, warmth could be created by sheer will. 13. Boar's tooth powder, the warrior's cure. Among the most peculiar relics of ancient rural medicine was a substance both sacred and savage: powdered boar's tooth. The tusks of the great wild boar, symbols of ferocity and unyielding strength, were ground into fine white dust by the hands of old hunters, often under the light of the waning moon. The powder had a faintly metallic scent, tinged with the ghost of blood and forest soil. It was used to treat infections and inflammation, sprinkled into wounds or dissolved in warm water for drinking. The belief was simple yet primal: by consuming the essence of the beast, one absorbed its endurance, its raw vitality. Warriors returning from battle carried pouches of it, tied with red string, both as remedy and charm. For peasants, it was also protection against the evil eye, thought to banish weakness and misfortune. Grinding the tusks was no casual act, it was done with reverence, as though each shard contained a fragment of the animal's spirit. In village legends, the boar was the guardian of hidden strength, a creature that could not be tamed, only respected. Using its tooth as medicine was both a risk and a prayer, for some said the beast's spirit might claim vengeance if disrespected. But for those who dared, the powder brought renewed vigor, easing ailments and restoring courage to the weary. The boar's tooth, reduced to dust yet still fierce, embodied a timeless truth, that healing sometimes required the spirit of the wild, drawn not from gentle nature, but from its roaring heart. 14. Smoked frog oil, the whisper of the marsh. In the misty lowlands of old Russia, where frogs croaked like ghosts at dusk and the air smelled of peat and decay, healers once sought their cure in the most unlikely of creatures. Frogs, believed to hold the secret of regeneration, were caught at dawn and placed in clay jars, buried beneath the hearth to smoke slowly for days. The resulting oil, thick, dark, and slick as the creature's skin, was collected drop by drop, its smell pungent and strange, like burnt grass and rain-soaked earth. It was used to treat infections, warts, and even blindness, rubbed into the skin or dropped into the eyes with trembling hands. Some claimed that the frog's spirits, bound between land and water, could mediate between worlds, healing what no human could reach. The ritual was conducted in silence, the healer's face lit only by firelight, as if communing with unseen forces. To touch the frog oil was to feel life and death entwined, slick, cool, and oddly alive. There were whispers that witches used it for darker rites, to see beyond the veil of mortality. Yet for all its eerie associations, the remedy worked. Its natural antiseptic powers soothed wounds, its oil sealed life back into cracked skin. To the villagers, it was proof that healing often hid in the grotesque, and that salvation might croak from the depths of a swamp. The smoked frog oil, though foul and feared, became a symbol of balance, of finding purity in filth, of life thriving even in decay. 15. bread kvass bath, the fermented blessing. There was perhaps no sound more comforting to a Russian peasant than the bubbling of kvass fermenting in a wooden barrel by the stove. Tangy, earthy, alive, it was the drink of life itself. But beyond quenching thirst, kvass found another, more mysterious use, as a cleansing bath for the body and spirit. When illness struck, when fevers refused to break or melancholy clung like shadow, healers prepared great tubs of warm bread kvass mixed with herbs, thyme, mint, and nettle. The liquid frothed and hissed softly, releasing a smell of sour rye and summer fields, both strange and comforting. Patients immersed themselves up to the neck, the effervescent warmth prickling their skin, bubbles rising like whispers against their flesh. It was said that kvass drew out toxins and evil humors, restoring balance to the blood. Old women sang while stirring the bath, their voices blending with the fizzing of fermentation, a melody of life reawakening. When the bather emerged, their skin glowed faintly, flushed and alive, the scent of bread and earth clinging like a blessing. The ritual was more than medicine. It was rebirth. Kvass was the soul of the land, born of grain, water, and patience, a living symbol of renewal. To bathe in it was to return to the roots of being, to shed sickness and sorrow and rise anew, baptized not in holy water, but in the humble miracle of fermentation.
16 베어 페트밤 더 스트렝스 오브 더 노스.
There was a time when winter ruled like a tyrant across the Russian north, when breath froze in the air and frost crept beneath the skin. And yet, among the hunters and woodcutters who lived where even wolves hesitated to roam, there was one cure that defied the cold itself: bear fat. Rendered from the thick, oily flesh of the sleeping beast, it glistened pale gold in the light of the hearth, heavy and warm, smelling faintly of smoke, resin, and raw life. The fat was melted slowly, purified over birch embers until clear, then poured into glass jars that shimmered like captured firelight. When rubbed into the skin, it sank deep, spreading heat through frozen muscles and aching bones. It was said to cure lung sickness, mend wounds, and even ward off frostbite. Hunters who tracked bears through snowstorms would keep a small flask close to their hearts, believing that to carry the essence of the beast was to borrow its endurance. The bear was sacred, the guardian of the forest, and before using its fat, one whispered thanks to its spirit. In villages, the smell of bear balm meant hope. It was the scent of returning strength, of survival wrestled from nature's most powerful creature. To anoint oneself with it was to become part of the wilderness, fierce, unyielding, eternal. In those long nights when the wind howled like ghosts, the golden fat burned faintly in oil lamps, a reminder that even in death, the bear gave life, its strength melting into human hands.
17 차워드 라이 앤드 솔트 컴프레스 더 빌리지 파이어 큐어.
When a fever struck in the old wooden villages, when a child burned and no priest would come through the storm, the cure was born from the simplest things: bread and salt, the sacred pair of Russian life. But this was no meal, it was a ritual of fire and endurance. A thick slice of black rye was baked until nearly turned to charcoal, its crust blackened, its scent bitter as smoke. Then the villagers would grind it with coarse salt, mix it with hot water, and press the steaming paste against the chest or back of the afflicted. The mixture hissed and steamed, releasing a smell both sharp and familiar: burnt bread, sweat, and salt of tears. The heat drew the fever out, they said, dragging sickness toward the surface until the body shivered, released, and cooled. The crackling bread spoke like embers dying in the stove, the salt left behind white crystals like frost. It was an act of faith, not just in medicine, but in the humble power of daily life. Bread was life, salt was truth, and together they made healing possible. Even long after the fever broke, the smell of burnt rye lingered in the air, a scent of fire's mercy. In every home, these ingredients stood side by side on the table and in the heart, symbols of sustenance and survival. Through them, the people whispered an ancient promise: that life, no matter how scorched or salted by suffering, would always rise again. 18. Cow dung smoke, the humble purifier. Few remedies inspired as much disbelief, or reverence, as the burning of cow dung. To the city folk of later centuries, it was a barbaric superstition. But to the peasants who lived by the rhythms of earth and animal, it was sacred science. When sickness stalked the air, plague, pox, or invisible evils, the villagers lit small fires of dried dung, letting the thick smoke fill homes and barns alike. The air grew dense, earthy, acrid, but strangely comforting, smelling of hay, life, and labor. They said it cleansed the space, drove out disease, and carried prayers upward like incense to forgotten gods. Mothers held their children in the smoky haze, whispering charms to keep death from the door. Healers rubbed ashes from the fire into the skin of the sick, believing it absorbed poison. And in truth, though crude, the smoke drove away insects and purified the air, saving countless lives. For those who lived closest to the soil, the line between medicine and magic blurred until they were one. Cow dung, despised by the unknowing, was in truth a gift of renewal, waste turned to protection, filth transformed into salvation. In every wisp of smoke rose the oldest of lessons, that nothing born of the earth is ever truly without worth. 19. Boiled pine needles, the breath of the forest. When the snows grew heavy and scurvy crept through villages cut off from the world, salvation came from the silent pine forests that stood watch over the land. The people knew, instinctively, reverently, that the needles of those evergreens held life even in the dead of winter. They boiled them in iron pots, the water turning pale green, steam curling upward like breath from the earth itself. The scent was sharp, clean, and sweet, a blend of sap and frost that seemed to chase away sickness from the lungs with every inhale. Children drank the bitter broth to restore their strength. Soldiers sipped it on frozen marches to keep their hearts beating. It was said that the forest whispered through that potion, that each cup carried the promise of spring. In folk songs, pine was called the eternal tree, never dying, never fading, a reminder of endurance. To drink its essence was to borrow its immortality. Afterward, the hut smelled of resin and snow, a miniature forest born from fire. The pine needle tonic was more than medicine, it was hope distilled. In every drop lay the spirit of the wild, clean, defiant, and quietly eternal.
20 스낵 스킨 폴티스 더 새드 오브 리버스.
Of all the strange and secret cures in the old Russian countryside, none was more feared, or more revered, than the snake skin poultice. When a healer found the shed skin of a serpent glinting pale among the reeds, it was taken as a sign from the earth itself. The skin, dry and translucent as parchment, was washed in river water and laid carefully upon the wound, burn, or aching joint. Sometimes it was soaked first in honey or alcohol, its surface softening, glimmering faintly in the light. The villagers said it carried the power of rebirth, for what creature was closer to renewal than one that shed its very flesh to live anew? The smell was faint, musky, tinged with the scent of river reeds. As it warmed against human skin, it seemed almost to fuse. Snake and man joined in silent exchange. Some said that if you listened closely, you could feel a pulse in it, a faint echo of the creature's life force still lingering. Though many feared the serpent for its venom, healers called it the doctor of the underworld, a creature of hidden wisdom. The poultice, they believed, did not just heal the body, it reminded the soul that everything, even pain, could be shed and transformed. And so, beneath candlelight, in huts where time itself seemed to sleep, the ancient ritual continued, the dead skin of the serpent breathing new life into those who dared to trust in nature's strangest miracles. 21. Wolf's Tooth Amulet, the guardian against shadows. In the endless dark of Russian winters, when wolves howled beyond the edge of torchlight and men vanished in the forests, there was one charm said to hold the power of both beast and spirit, the wolf's tooth. Hung on a leather cord, polished smooth by years of touch, it gleamed like ivory moonlight. Hunters wore it over their hearts, mothers tied it to their children's cradles. The tooth was more than a relic, it was a talisman carved by fear and reverence alike. It was believed that the wolf, master of the wilderness, could sense evil long before man could name it. To carry its tooth was to inherit its sight, its defiance against the dark. Folk healers whispered that it kept away nightmares, fever, and madness. When pressed to the skin of the sick, it was said to draw out the cold wind, the invisible curse that brought weakness and delirium. In the stillness of night, one could almost hear the faint echo of a growl within the tooth itself, as if the spirit of the wolf lingered, ever watchful. For the villagers, it was protection not just from sickness, but from the unknown. It reminded them that man, too, is a creature of instinct and wildness, and that in the balance between beast and human lies the secret to survival. The wolf's tooth was the pulse of the wild, captured and worn by those brave enough to live on its edge.
22 크로즈 패더 인퓨전, 더 드링 오브 프라퍼시.
Few dared to brew the dark potion of the crow. It was said to bring health, or visions. The feathers of the black bird, sacred to death and wisdom alike, were steeped in hot water along with wild herbs and honey. The resulting infusion shimmered with an oily sheen, its scent sharp and metallic, like rain on iron. The taste was bitter, strange, unforgettable, a flavor that lingered in the mouth long after the cup was drained. Folk healers claimed it could cure melancholy and clear the mind of confusion. Others believed it allowed one to glimpse the truth of things unseen. In whispers passed around the hearth, villagers told of those who drank it and awoke with strange dreams, of crows circling the moon, of lost loved ones speaking in riddles. The feathers were gathered only under a new moon, from birds that had willingly left them near crossroads, where fate itself was said to waver. The healer would whisper old Slavic prayers as the brew steamed and hissed, sending up a faint black vapor that curled like a shadow come alive. Though many feared to drink it, those who did often claimed to feel lighter, calmer, as if their burdens had been shared by the bird who once flew between worlds. The crow's feather tea was not merely medicine, it was communion with the unknown, a sip of mystery that blurred the line between healing and prophecy. 23. Dead water and living water. The elemental cure. No story of Russian folk healing could be told without the ancient belief in dead water and living water. The two were opposites, forces of death and rebirth, destruction and restoration. Dead water was drawn from a still pond, from beneath ice or from a place where no wind stirred the surface. It was said to close wounds, stop bleeding, and preserve the body, but it could not bring life. Living water, by contrast, flowed fast and pure, from mountain streams, spring wells, or melt from first snow. It sparkled with light, carrying the power to awaken the lifeless. In old tales, heroes struck down in battle were anointed with both, the dead water first, to seal their mortal wounds, and the living water after, to call their souls back. But it was not only myth. Healers used this ritual symbolically for the gravely ill, washing their faces first with still water, then with running water from a stream. The difference, they said, was not in the water itself, but in the balance of the world it represented. One could not live without facing death. One could not heal without surrender. The taste of each was distinct, one heavy, mineral, cold, the other light, almost sweet, as though infused with sunlight. Even today, in hidden valleys and forgotten monasteries, there are whispers that those two waters still exist, and that to drink them both, in the right order, is to understand the secret of all healing, that every life is born twice, once in pain and once in light. 24. Moon milk. The silver elixir. There was an old superstition in the rural heartlands that the moon's reflection on milk carried a divine essence. Women would set out bowls of fresh milk on the windowsill under a full moon, leaving it there until dawn. The next morning, the liquid would appear faintly luminescent, with a silvery sheen dancing on its surface. This was moon milk, a potion believed to cleanse the spirit, restore beauty, and ease sorrow. When drunk warm with honey, it was said to bring vivid dreams and strengthen the heart. The practice was gentle, almost holy, a quiet moment shared between woman and moon, the most ancient of mirrors. The milk scent, sweet and earthy, mingled with the night air and the faint perfume of lilac or snow, depending on the season. Those who practiced it claimed that the moon blessed the milk, filling it with calmness and clarity. Healers prescribed it for restless children and grieving widows alike. Even the cows, they said, gave sweeter milk when they slept under moonlight. Though science has forgotten it, the tradition lingers like a half-remembered lullaby. For in that glowing bowl, the people saw more than a drink. They saw the reflection of their own souls, soft and fleeting, but full of light.
25 더 위스퍼링 버치, 더 솔즈 라스트 레머디.
And finally, there was the birch, the eternal symbol of Russia herself. When all other cures failed, when death lingered too close to the bed, the villagers would carry the sick to the birch grove at dawn. The pale trees stood silent and graceful, their bark gleaming white against the blue morning haze. There, the healer would press the patient's hand to the bark and whisper an ancient prayer, "Take what is dying, give what still breathes." The birch was said to absorb pain and illness, drawing it into its silver skin. Some would tie scraps of cloth or ribbons to the branches, offerings of gratitude or pleas for mercy. The air smelled of sap, damp earth, and something faintly electric, life itself, humming unseen. As wind moved through the leaves, it made a sound like soft speech, as though the forest was murmuring in response. People left that place feeling lighter, as if their souls had been rinsed clean. The birch was not just a tree, it was a listener, a confessor, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. To the old people, it was the last remedy, not for the body, but for the spirit. Its whisper was the promise that even as life fades, something pure, something eternal, waits in the white arms of the birch.